Good morning, everybody. So if you look over here, this is a little video that's just to give you a few pointers if you're looking at your grounds and they're not quite up to the par that you'd like them to be at. So if you look over here, see all this grass along the edge? The customer just came up to me, lovely lady, older, been in this house for a long time. She just came up to me and she said, "Tell Esta thank you so much for cleaning up the edge," because her husband used to come out here and get down on his knees and get rid of all the grass that was growing along here. So it's the first thing we look at when we come in, is what does it look like as a homeowner when you're coming home to your property? Do you want to see a line of grass, or do you want to see it nice and clean? It takes a little bit of extra time, but it's a nice difference. A few things I wanted to point out. We did a walk of the property first, and if you're dealing with any of these sorts of things, these are just some tips. So they had grubs, chafer beetles, and what happens with chafer beetles that not a lot of people know is they eat the root system. So you're left with no organic material in the soil. They just chomp away at anything that's organic, and what you end up with, kind of see it here, it's kind of a broken down soil. There's not much in the sand, or it's like more of a sand mix. It's depleted of anything organic, and that's why nothing is growing in these areas. So what we're going to be doing is topsoiling and overseeding, but it's not the right time of the year to do it. So we're not going to do anything that doesn't make sense. We're going to wait until after the summer heat, and while the ground is still warm, we're going to top dress all of this. We're going to top dress all of this because it's the same situation, but we had a conversation with the customer at the beginning and explained that essentially when anybody tries to do anything with their lawn, if it's been compromised, you have to start with the soil. A soil test is the best first step, going to a lab instead of just the ones that you can do online, because they will give you a recommendation about which fertilizer to use to restore all of the proper nutrients to the soil, so that when you go to do anything, you're dealing with a foundation, a ground, that is actually fertile, and that's going to give the best results that you can get. Then you fertilize after that as well to keep the nutrients up, but you can't do anything quick fix to depleted soil. So if you're doing anything with your grass, make sure you know what's going on with the soil, and if you see certain things going on with it, patterns in the grass and stuff like that, just Google it. You'll usually get results, or go down to your local nursery and talk to them about it. There's a couple of what look like ring fungus spots going on here, and you can see the difference in the color of the grass and what's going on the inside. So just kind of take a look at what's going on. You can see it here as well. So a ring fungus is treatable with a fungicide, but that's another step. And right now, the other thing you want to consider is what's the climate been like this year for you? Have there been more extreme heats, more temperatures that the grass can't stand? Because there's areas in the back of her yard that are suffering, but others that aren't, and it's literally because of the amount of shade that it's been getting compared to, or comparatively. And we've had some really extreme heats in the last week. It's been record-breaking heats. So when you're looking out at your lawn and you want to do anything, you have to look at it like it's a living, breathing organism. And the ground state for anybody has to be healthy. And yeah, you want to make sure you start with the soil, and don't just go for the weed and feed fertilizers. We actually had to talk her out of that, because you'll compromise the soil nutrients more than anything. Everything you put on the grass eventually ends up in the soil, and you want to make sure that you're not continually adding and over toxifying the soil. You want to get it to the point where it's like a freshly composted, nice, rich soil, but you've got to feed it properly, and then you have a chance for anything that you do with your grass to thrive. Sod even will fail after 2 years if you don't condition the soil underneath it. Here's another thing to look for. If you're walking along and you see roots exposed, you want to make sure that you definitely topsoil this. Give it a good composted soil so that there's nutrients that are going to break down over time. So we've talked to her about adding some soil to this, and even though it's going to be mounded up afterwards, we're also going to add some mulch, because the mulch will retain the moisture that keeps the plants healthy. And her plants are doing well, but again, considering the extreme temperatures, you want to make sure you're doing something preventative. This soil is fairly depleted as well, and there's no topsoil, or I mean no mulch, so we're going to add mulch here. If you're doing a walk around and you're looking at different things going on, here's another thing we looked at. So right now, all the plants are just starting to thrive because long, extended kind of cold temperatures into spring, and then extreme temperatures. So she wants this pom-pommed, ornamentalized, shaped, but we're not going to do it now, because look at all the new growth on this. If we did anything to this plant right now, it would basically put it into shock. And you can see what happens when the plant goes into shock. It actually starts to get compromised on every level. It's the same thing as if you just scalped your own. If you cut your hair, but you cut it down, took off a layer of skin, you're going to be in pain, you're going to suffer. So you want to make sure you're not scalping your plants. Give them a really good chance to thrive through the season. Do all of your hard pruning or even light pruning later in the year. Even though things don't have the shape that you would want for a garden that looks like it's being tended to, it's actually way, way better to just let everything thrive, let it come to full growth, and then after late spring, early summer, late summer, early winter, early fall, you can do some hard pruning, but you can see what happens. There's a whole bunch of new growth, and then there's some growth underneath that was trimmed back a little too far. You can still see some of the dead. So pruning the plants and trimming them is all about timing, and you don't want to do it when they're thriving, because that's all the new growth, that's all the energy the plant has that it's putting into becoming healthier. All the hard pruning should be done at the end of the year, or end of the winter, when the plants are still dormant. This is another thing we looked at and noticed. There's a big hole here. There's some roots that are exposed, and it's got direct exposure to the sun all day long pretty much. So we're going to be adding some soil to this pretty quickly, because if we get those extreme temperatures again, all those roots that are exposed are just going to get kind of cooked. And it's a beautiful rhodo, but it will get compromised over time if something isn't done. So if you see root exposure, or even if the landscape fabric is coming up, soil, good composted soil with nutrients built into it is the best way to go. And then over here, there's some plants that are doing well because they're coming into their season. Other plants that are dying off, the best thing to do is just trim everything back. Anything that's dying, just kind of take it down and let the other plants get the nutrients and thrive through their season as well. So even though some things look a little rough right now, we're just letting everything go. And that's actually one of the things that we find makes us a little different, is that we will not do anything to your property. That is not the healthiest move in the long term. So that was just a regular upkeep visit, a couple pointers, things to look for if you're looking at doing stuff on your property, and how to maintain the healthiest grounds that you can. Grass, gardens, and grounds.